The blood-curdling howl sent chills down Hope O'Sullivan's spine as she urged her exhausted mare faster through the snow-covered terrain. February 1878 had brought an unusually harsh winter to the Arizona Territory, and now, miles from Casa Grande, she realized her foolishness in attempting to return home before nightfall. Hope glanced over her shoulder, her heart hammering when she spotted the gray shadows weaving between the pine trees. 5 wolves, maybe more, gaining ground with each passing second. Her horse, Penny, was already lathered with sweat despite the biting cold, having carried Hope through the mountains for hours. "Come on, girl," Hope whispered, leaning forward against Penny's neck. "Just a little farther." But the mare's stride was faltering, her breath coming in labored puffs visible in the frigid air. The howls grew closer, no longer distant threats but imminent danger. Hope fought against the rising panic, her fingers numb inside her leather gloves as she clutched the reins. She shouldn't have left her father's homestead so late. At 22, Hope considered herself experienced in the ways of the frontier, having moved west with her father and brothers 5 years prior, after her mother's death. But her stubborn determination to deliver medicines to her ailing father had clouded her judgment. A wolf darted from the trees, snapping at Penny's hind legs. The mare reared in terror, nearly unseating Hope. She screamed, more in anger than fear, swinging her satchel at the predator. The wolf retreated momentarily, but Hope knew their reprieve would be brief. The path ahead descended into a small valley, and Hope spotted smoke rising from a cabin nestled against the hillside. Salvation, if she could reach it. She urged Penny forward, but a fallen log blocked their path. As the mare gathered herself to jump, another wolf lunged from the side. Penny stumbled, her footing lost in the deep snow. Hope felt herself thrown from the saddle, the world spinning as she crashed into the frozen ground. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. She rolled, disoriented, desperately searching for her horse. Penny had regained her footing and bolted down the path, leaving Hope alone with the approaching pack. Hope scrambled backward, drawing the small revolver from her coat pocket, her brother's parting gift. 6 shots against 5 wolves. She might stand a chance if her aim was true, but the fading light and her trembling hands offered little comfort. The lead wolf, a massive gray beast with amber eyes, advanced slowly, its lips curled back to reveal yellowed fangs. Hope steeled herself, raising the revolver. The crack of a rifle split the air before she could fire. The lead wolf yelped, blood blooming on its shoulder before it retreated. More shots followed in quick succession, precise and deadly. 2 wolves fell, motionless in the snow. The others scattered, disappearing into the gathering darkness. Hope remained frozen, the revolver still pointed where the wolves had been. Footsteps crunched in the snow behind her, but she couldn't tear her gaze away from the dead predators. "Madam, are you hurt?" The voice was deep, raspy, as if seldom used. Hope turned slowly, her eyes settling on a tall figure emerging from the trees. He wore a long, dark coat dusted with snow, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his face. A Winchester rifle rested against his shoulder, wisps of smoke still curling from its barrel. I'm fine," Hope stammered, lowering her revolver with shaking hands. "My horse." "Ran down to my cabin," the man said, keeping his distance. "She's safe." Hope tried to stand, but her legs buckled beneath her. The stranger moved forward with surprising speed, catching her arm before she fell. His grip was firm, yet gentle. As he steadied her, Hope caught her first clear glimpse of his face in the fading light. The left side was handsome enough strong jaw, straight nose, clear blue eye. But the right side bore a web of scars that pulled at his eye and twisted his mouth into a permanent half-grimace. The scarred tissue was pink in some places, silvery white in others, extending from his temple down past his collar. Hope couldn't help but stare, though she immediately regretted it when the man turned his face away, adjusting his hat to hide the worst of the damage. "Thank you," Hope said quickly, embarrassed by her reaction. "You saved my life." The man merely nodded, releasing her arm once he was certain she could stand. "It'll be dark soon. Wolves might return." His words were clipped, his manner brusque. "Cabin's not far." Hope glanced around at the darkening forest. She had little choice but to trust this scarred stranger. "Lead the way, mister." After a moment's hesitation, he answered, "Lawson? Lucas Lawson." "Hope O'Sullivan," she replied, offering a smile he didn't return. Lucas Lawson turned without another word and began walking down the path. Hope followed, grateful for his timely rescue, yet wary of the silent, scarred man leading her into the wilderness. The cabin appeared smaller up close than it had from the hillside. Built of sturdy logs with a stone chimney, it nestled against an outcropping of rock that sheltered it from the northern winds. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth within. To one side stood a small stable where Hope could see Penny safely tethered. Lucas pushed open the heavy wooden door, stepping aside to let Hope enter first. The interior was surprisingly neat, if sparse. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the log walls. A table with 2 chairs occupied one corner. A narrow bed the other. Shelves lined one wall, holding books, supplies, and what appeared to be medical equipment. "You can warm yourself by the fire," Lucas said, setting his rifle on pegs by the door. He removed his coat and hat, hanging them on hooks, no longer attempting to hide his scarred face. Hope moved to the fireplace, extending her cold hands toward the flames. "Are you a doctor?" she asked, nodding toward the medical supplies. "Was," came the curt reply. Lucas moved to a pot hanging near the fire, stirring its contents. "Army surgeon, before the injury that had left him so scarred," Hope presumed. She didn't press for details. "I need to get home to Casa Grande," she said instead. "My father's ill." "Not tonight," Lucas replied, ladling stew into a bowl. "Storm's coming. Trail's dangerous, even without wolves." He handed her the bowl and a spoon. "Eat." Hope accepted the food, suddenly aware of her hunger. The stew was simple but flavorful, filled with venison and wild vegetables. Lucas served himself a smaller portion, sitting across from her at the table. They ate in silence, Lucas keeping his scarred side angled away from her, his movements methodical and precise. Hope found herself stealing glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking. Despite the scars, or perhaps because of them, there was something compelling about the man. His good eye was a striking blue, intense and intelligent. His hands, though weathered, moved with the dexterity one would expect from a surgeon. "How long have you lived out here?" Hope asked, unable to bear the silence any longer. Lucas considered the question, as if calculating. 3 years. "Alone?" He nodded, returning to his meal. "I've been in Arizona territory for 5 years, Hope offered, undeterred by his reticence. "My father, brothers and I came from Boston after my mother passed. Father wanted a fresh start." She paused, then added softly, "Sometimes I miss the city." Lucas showed no reaction to her attempt at conversation, but when she finished speaking, he asked, "What illness?" "Pardon?" "Your father. What illness?" "Oh," Hope said, surprised by his interest. "Pneumonia, I fear. I was bringing him medicine from the doctor in Tucson." Lucas nodded thoughtfully. "I have medicines here. Better than what you'd find in town." Hope brightened. "You do? Could I purchase some from you?" "No need. Take what you need when you leave." He stood, collecting their empty bowls. "You can have the bed tonight. I'll sleep by the fire." "I couldn't possibly." "Take the bed," he insisted, his tone brooking no argument. He moved to a chest at the foot of the bed, pulling out a clean blanket. "There's water in the basin if you want to wash." Hope wanted to protest further, but recognized the stubborn set of his jaw. This man who had saved her life was now offering her shelter, food, and medicine for her father. His gruff manner couldn't diminish such kindness. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson," she said sincerely. "For everything." He paused, seeming uncomfortable with her gratitude. With a slight nod, he turned away, busying himself with preparations for the night. Hope washed her face and hands in the basin, the cool water refreshing after her ordeal. When she turned back, Lucas had arranged blankets near the fire and was adding another log to the flames. Outside, the wind had picked up, whistling around the cabin's corners. Snow pattered against the single window. As she settled into the narrow bed, Hope watched Lucas through half-closed eyes. He sat on a stool by the fire, his profile illuminated by the flickering light. The scars were less prominent in the soft glow, The hard lines of his face relaxed. He opened a book, seemingly lost in its pages. Hope wondered what had happened to this solitary man. What battles had he fought? What had driven him to this remote existence? As sleep claimed her, she resolved to learn more about the mysterious Lucas Lawson before their paths diverged. Morning brought clear skies and brilliant sunshine that transformed the snow-covered landscape into a dazzling spectacle. Hope woke to the scent of coffee and the sound of movement. Lucas stood at the small stove, his back to her, preparing breakfast. "Good morning," Hope said, sitting up and smoothing her tousled auburn hair. Lucas turned, nodding in acknowledgement. He looked different in the daylight, still imposing at well over 6 feet, but less forbidding. He'd shaved, revealing more of his face, including the full extent of the scarring. It continued down his neck, disappearing beneath his collarbone. "Storm passed," he said, placing a mug of coffee and a plate of cornbread and eggs before her. "Trail to Casa Grande should be clear." Hope accepted the breakfast gratefully. "Have you lived in Arizona territory long?" she asked, trying once more to engage him in conversation. Lucas poured himself coffee before answering. "Since 75, after the war." "You fought in the Civil War?" Hope asked, surprised. Though in his mid-30s, Lucas would have been young during those conflicts. "And after. Army surgeon with the 7th Cavalry." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Until Little Bighorn?" Hope's eyes widened. "Custer's last stand?" The battle had occurred less than 2 years prior, the news of the massacre shocking the nation. Lucas nodded once, his expression closing. He touched the scarred side of his face unconsciously. One of the few who survived. Hope understood now the scars, the isolation, the nightmares that must plague him. She'd heard stories of the battle's brutality. "I'm sorry," she said softly. Lucas moved to a cabinet, removing various bottles and packets. "These will help your father," he said, changing the subject. "Willow bark for fever, this tincture for chest congestion." Hope watched as he methodically prepared medicines, explaining each with the precision of a man who had once practiced medicine with confidence. His knowledge was evident, his instructions clear. This was a glimpse of the man he had been before the scars, before Little Bighorn had changed him forever. "You must have been an excellent doctor," Hope observed. Lucas paused, a shadow crossing his face. "Once," he agreed quietly. When the medicines were packed, Lucas checked on Penny, pronouncing the mare rested enough for the journey. He insisted on accompanying Hope at least part of the way to Casa Grande, concerned about the wolves potentially returning. They set out mid-morning, Lucas on a sturdy brown gelding, leading the way through the snow-covered forest. Hope found herself studying him, as they rode the straight line of his back, the confident way he handled his mount, the alertness with which he scanned their surroundings. "Have you always lived alone?" she asked as they navigated a narrow trail. Lucas kept his eyes on the path ahead. "Since the battle." "No family?" A muscle in his jaw tightened. "Had a fiancé in St. Louis." The past tense told Hope everything she needed to know. "I'm sorry," she said again, regretting her prying questions. "Don't be," Lucas replied, his voice flat. "She made her choice when she saw what was left of me." The bitterness in his words made Hope's heart ache for him. "That must have been difficult." Lucas gave a humorless laugh. "Found out who my true friends were." He glanced at her, his good eye narrowing. "People show their true nature when faced with deformity, Miss O'Sullivan. Remember that." "Not everyone turns away," Hope countered gently. "Don't they?" His tone held challenge. "You couldn't look at me without flinching when we first met." Heat rushed to Hope's cheeks. "That was surprise, not revulsion, Mr. Lawson. There's a difference." Lucas studied her for a moment, seemingly weighing the sincerity of her words, before turning his attention back to the trail. They rode in silence for a time, the only sounds the crunch of snow beneath hooves and the occasional call of a winter bird. "Why Casa Grande?" Lucas eventually asked. "Not much there compared to Tucson." Hope smiled, grateful for the shift in conversation. "My father was drawn to the agricultural possibilities. He was a businessman in Boston, but always dreamed of farming. My brothers help run our small ranch outside town." She sighed. It's been difficult, especially since the Apache raids increased last summer. The army stirred up trouble, Lucas observed, pushing tribes onto reservations, breaking treaties. Can't blame them for fighting back. Hope was surprised by his perspective. Many settlers viewed the Apache only as savages to be feared. You sound sympathetic to their cause. Lucas's expression darkened. Seen both sides of the fight. Neither is entirely right. He adjusted his hat against the sun's glare. Your brothers manage the ranch while your father is ill? Yes, James and William. They're twins, 19 now. Good boys, but they need guidance. Hope smiled fondly. They were heartbroken when I insisted on bringing the medicine myself, but father needed someone to stay with him. And no husband to send instead? The question was asked casually, but Hope detected genuine curiosity beneath it. No husband, she confirmed. Not for lack of offers, but... She trailed off, unsure how to explain that the men who had courted her in Casa Grande had seemed shallow, interested in her father's modest wealth, or her pretty face rather than her mind or spirit. Lucas nodded, asking no further questions. By midday they had reached a ridge overlooking a valley. In the distance, Hope could make out the scattered buildings of Casa Grande and, further out, the ranch that had been her home for 5 years. I know this area, Hope said with relief. It's safe from here. The ranch is just beyond that stand of cottonwoods. Lucas reined in his horse, surveying the landscape with a critical eye. Still 3 miles. I'll see you home. There's no need. Wolves have long memories, he interrupted. And they're not the only danger out here. Hope wanted to argue but recognized the logic in his words. Moreover, she found herself reluctant to part ways with the enigmatic doctor. Very well. I'm sure my father would like to thank you personally for the medicine. Something like apprehension flashed across Lucas's face, but he nodded curtly and urged his horse forward. Hope wondered if he regretted his offer to accompany her all the way home, knowing he would face the curious and possibly judgmental gazes of her family. The O'Sullivan Ranch came into view as they descended into the valley. It was modest compared to some in the territory, a main house built of adobe brick, a barn, corrals, and several outbuildings. Fields stretched behind it, dormant under winter's grip, but promising bounty in the spring. As they approached, a figure emerged from the barn, tall and lanky, with the same auburn hair as Hope. That's William, Hope said, waving to her brother. James is likely with father. William spotted them and hurried forward, his expression shifting from welcome to wariness, as he noticed Lucas riding beside his sister. By the time they reached the yard, he stood waiting, a rifle held casually but visibly in his hands. Hope! We were worried sick, William called, his eyes darting to Lucas. Who's your friend? Hope dismounted, embracing her brother quickly. William, this is Mr. Lucas Lawson. He saved my life yesterday when I was attacked by wolves. Mr. Lawson, my brother William O'Sullivan. William's posture relaxed slightly. Wolves? Good Lord, Hope. I'm fine, thanks to Mr. Lawson, Hope assured him. He's also provided medicine for father. How is he today? No better, but no worse, William replied, turning to Lucas with newfound respect. We're in your debt, sir. Please, come inside. Lucas hesitated, then dismounted slowly. Hope noticed how he kept the scarred side of his face angled away from William, who had the grace not to stare when he did catch a glimpse of the damage. Just doing what anyone would, Lucas muttered. William took the horses to the barn, while Hope led Lucas to the house. It was warmer inside than Lucas's cabin had been, with more signs of habitation, framed photographs on the walls, books scattered on tables, a half-finished quilt draped over a chair. James appeared from a back room, his face brightening at the sight of his sister. Hope! Thank heavens! Like his twin, his gaze immediately shifted to Lucas, curiosity and caution mingling in his expression. After introductions were made, Hope asked, Can I see father? James nodded. He's awake, been asking for you. Hope turned to Lucas. Would you come with me to explain the medicines? Lucas looked uncomfortable, but nodded, following Hope down a short hallway to a bedroom at the back of the house. Inside, propped against several pillows, lay an elderly man with a shock of white hair and Hope's same green eyes. Despite his evident illness, his face lit up at the sight of his daughter. Hope, my girl, he rasped, extending a trembling hand. You made it home. Hope rushed to his side, clasping his hand and kissing his forehead. "I brought medicine, Father, and a doctor." Henry O'Sullivan's gaze shifted to Lucas, who stood awkwardly in the doorway. To his credit, the older man showed no reaction to Lucas's scars beyond a brief widening of his eyes. "A doctor? Out here?" Henry's voice was weak, but retained a hint of his Boston accent. "Former Army surgeon," Lucas clarified, stepping forward reluctantly. "I've prepared some remedies that should help with the pneumonia." Hope explained her encounter with the wolves and Lucas's rescue as the former surgeon examined Henry, listening to his chest and checking his fever. Lucas's demeanor changed as he worked, becoming more confident, more focused. The doctor he had once been emerged through the shell of the recluse he had become. "Lung sounds are congested, but not severely," Lucas reported. "Fever's moderate. With proper treatment, you should recover fully." He explained the medicines he had prepared, giving detailed instructions on dosages and timing. Hope watched, fascinated by this transformation. For the first time since they'd met, Lucas seemed fully present, engaged with something beyond his own isolation. "You have my deepest gratitude, Dr. Lawson," Henry said when Lucas had finished. "Please, stay for dinner at least. It's the least we can offer for saving my daughter and helping me." Lucas's discomfort returned immediately. "Not necessary. Should head back before dark." "Nonsense," Henry insisted. "It would be unconscionable to send you away without proper hospitality. Hope, show the doctor where he can refresh himself while James prepares dinner." Hope recognized the tone her father might be ill, but he remained the master of his household. Lucas seemed to recognize it too, offering a resigned nod rather than the further argument. As Hope led him back to the main room, she said quietly, "I apologize for my father's insistence, but I agree with him. Please stay, at least for the night. The journey back would be dangerous in darkness." Lucas hesitated, then sighed. "One night," he conceded. "I'll leave at first light." Dinner was a strained affair at first. William and James exchanged uncertain glances when they thought no one was looking, their discomfort with Lucas's scarred appearance evident despite their efforts to hide it. Lucas ate little, his responses to questions brief and non-committal. It was Henry joining them at the table against Lucas's medical advice who finally broke through the awkwardness. "So, Dr. Lawson, Hope tells me you survived Little Bighorn. A remarkable feat." Lucas stiffened, but Henry continued undeterred. "I had a cousin with the 7th, Richard O'Sullivan. Perhaps you knew him?" Something flickered in Lucas's expression. Recognition. "Captain O'Sullivan, Medical Corps. He didn't survive." Henry nodded solemnly. "We heard. A good man, Richard." "He was," Lucas agreed, his voice softening slightly. "Saved many lives before his own was taken. He taught me much about frontier medicine." This common connection seemed to thaw something in Lucas. As the meal progressed, he spoke more freely, answering Henry's thoughtful questions about his medical background and military service. Hope watched with growing interest as glimpses of the man beneath the scars emerged, intelligent, articulate, even occasionally humorous in a dry, understated way. After dinner, when Henry had returned to his bed and the twins had gone to check on the livestock, Hope found herself alone with Lucas by the fireplace. He stood examining a daguerreotype on the mantel Hope's mother, taken shortly before her death. "Your mother?" he asked as Hope approached. "Yes, Sarah O'Sullivan. She died of consumption 5 years ago." Lucas nodded, understanding in his eyes. "A difficult death to witness." "Is that why you became a doctor? To ease suffering?" He considered the question, replacing the photograph carefully. "Partly. Mostly followed my father's footsteps. He was a surgeon in Philadelphia." "Do you miss it? Being a doctor?" Lucas turned to face her fully, making no attempt to hide his scars in the firelight. "Miss helping people? Yes. Miss society's reaction to this?" He gestured to his face. "No. People can be cruel," Hope agreed softly. "But not everyone judges by appearance alone." "Don't they?" Lucas challenged, echoing their earlier conversation. "Even you, Miss O'Sullivan, with your kind heart, can you truly look at me without seeing the scars first?" Hope met his gaze steadily. "I see them, Mr. Lawson. I would be lying if I claimed otherwise. But I also see the man who risked his life to save mine. The doctor who still remembers his oath to heal. The person beneath the scars. Something shifted in Lucas's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or the barest hint of hope. Before he could respond, William and James returned, bringing with them a gust of cold air and news of an approaching storm. "Looks like you'll be staying more than one night, Dr. Lawson," William remarked, stomping snow from his boots. "Sky's full of clouds moving in fast." Lucas frowned, moving to the window to confirm for himself. The darkness outside revealed little, but the rising wind whistling around the eaves told its own story. "Could I impose on you for some paper and ink?" he asked Hope. "Should send word to neighbors about your father's condition." Hope fetched the requested items, watching as Lucas wrote a detailed account of Henry's illness and treatment, along with recommendations should his condition worsen. His handwriting was precise and elegant. Another remnant of the educated man he had been still was beneath the layers of isolation. "My brothers can deliver it tomorrow," Hope offered, but Lucas shook his head. "I'll take it when I leave, after the storm." The storm lasted 3 days, transforming the landscape into a pristine wilderness of white drifts and ice-coated trees. During this forced confinement, Hope observed Lucas gradually lowering his defenses. With Henry, he discussed medicine and literature, revealing a well-read mind. With the twins, he shared practical knowledge of surviving in the territory tracking, hunting techniques, weather prediction. With Hope, the conversations ran deeper. During quiet afternoons by her father's bedside, as they monitored his improving condition, Lucas slowly revealed more of his past. The promising medical career cut short by the war. His decision to join the army as a surgeon, hoping to save lives rather than take them. The horrors he witnessed at Little Bighorn, where he had sustained his injuries while attempting to treat wounded soldiers. "I should have died there," he confessed on the third day, his voice barely audible above the whistling wind outside. "Sometimes, I think I was meant to." They sat in Henry's room, the older man sleeping peacefully after taking his medicine. Hope had been embroidering, but at Lucas's words, she set her needlework aside. "The world would be poorer if you had," she said quietly. Lucas gave a bitter laugh. "The world has forgotten I exist, Miss O'Sullivan, and perhaps that's for the best." "I haven't forgotten," Hope countered, "nor has my father, whose life you likely saved with your medicines, nor will any others you might help, if you chose to practice medicine again. Who would trust a doctor with a face like this?" Lucas gestured to his scars, his expression challenging. "Anyone with sense would value skill over appearance," Hope replied firmly. "The people of Casa Grande have no doctor closer than Tucson. They would welcome your expertise, regardless of scars." Lucas fell silent, considering her words. Hope wondered if she had overstepped, but she couldn't regret speaking the truth as she saw it. In the days since their first meeting, she had come to respect Lucas Lawson deeply, his intelligence, his quiet strength, his hidden compassion. The scars that had initially shocked her now seemed merely a part of him, no more defining than the color of his eyes or the shape of his hands. On the morning of the 4th day, the storm finally broke, revealing a transformed world of sparkling white. Lucas announced his intention to leave, despite Henry's protests that he should remain longer. "Been an imposition long enough?" Lucas insisted as Hope helped him gather his few belongings. "You've been anything but an imposition," Hope countered. "Father's recovery is thanks to you." Lucas paused in packing medicines into his saddlebag. He would have recovered regardless. His constitution is strong. "Perhaps," Hope conceded, "but your presence has been valuable nonetheless." Their eyes met briefly before Lucas looked away. "I should thank you," he said quietly, "for your family's hospitality, despite—" He gestured vaguely toward his scarred face. Hope stepped closer, bold in a way that surprised even herself. "Mr. Lawson Lucas, I wish you could see that your scars matter far less than you believe." He stiffened, still avoiding her gaze. "Your kindness is admirable, Miss O'Sullivan, but we both know the reality. I've seen how people react. Even your brothers, decent men though they are, can barely look at me directly." "They're young and inexperienced," Hope argued. "Given time—" "Time doesn't change human nature?" Lucas interrupted. He closed his saddlebag with finality. "I should go while daylight lasts." Hope wanted to argue further, but recognized the stubborn set of his jaw. Instead, she nodded, following him as he made his farewells to her father and brothers. Henry extracted a promise that Lucas would return in a week to check on his recovery, a commitment Lucas gave reluctantly, clearly intending to send medicines rather than come himself. As Lucas mounted his horse in the yard, Hope approached one final time. "The offer stands, you know," she said, looking up at him. "Casa Grande needs a doctor. You would be welcomed here." Lucas looked down at her, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Goodbye, Miss O'Sullivan. Take care on your journeys. The wolves may return." With that cryptic warning, he turned his horse and rode away, a solitary figure against the vast white landscape. Hope watched until he disappeared from view, an unexpected ache forming in her chest. "Quite a man," Henry observed from the doorway behind her, despite his efforts to hide it. Hope turned to her father. "Surprised to find him out of bed. You should be resting." Henry waved away her concern. "I'm much improved, thanks to your doctor." "He's not my doctor, father." Henry's knowing smile suggested he thought otherwise. "Not yet, perhaps, but I saw how you looked at him, Hope, and how he looked at you when he thought no one was watching." Heat rose in Hope's cheeks. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" Henry chuckled softly. "I may be old, but my eyes work perfectly well. That man has spent years hiding from the world because of his scars. Yet, in just a few days, you had him engaged in conversation, sharing meals at our table, almost forgetting to keep his injured side in shadow." Hope said nothing, her gaze returning to the empty horizon where Lucas had disappeared. "He'll be back," Henry predicted, patting her shoulder. If only to convince himself that what he found here wasn't real. The week passed slowly. Hope threw herself into her usual duties, caring for her recovering father, helping with household chores, assisting her brothers with ranch accounts. But her thoughts frequently drifted to Lucas, his quiet dignity, his hidden kindness, the rare occasions when she had coaxed a smile to his lips. True to Henry's prediction, Lucas did not return after a week as promised. Instead, William returned from town with a package containing medicines, detailed instructions written in Lucas's elegant hand, and a brief note expressing hope for Henry's continued recovery. Hope tried to hide her disappointment, but her father saw through her forced smile. "Give him time," Henry advised gently. "Men like Lucas Lawson don't change overnight." Another week passed, and Hope found herself riding to town for supplies, deliberately taking the route that would pass closest to Lucas's cabin. She told herself it was merely concern for a neighbor, nothing more, but her quickening pulse betrayed her. The cabin appeared deserted when she approached. Smoke rose from the chimney, but there was no sign of life outside. Hope hesitated, unsure whether to announce her presence or continue on her way. As she debated, the door opened and Lucas emerged, rifle in hand. He froze upon seeing her, clearly surprised. "Miss O'Sullivan." "Mr. Lawson," Hope returned, suddenly feeling foolish. "I was passing by on my way to town. Thought I'd check if you needed anything." Lucas's expression suggested he didn't believe this explanation for a moment, but he merely said, "I'm well supplied. Thank you." An awkward silence stretched between them. "My father is much improved," Hope offered, "thanks to your medicines." "Good to hear." Hope searched for something else to say, anything to prolong the encounter. "We missed you last week. Father was looking forward to thanking you again in person." Lucas shifted uncomfortably. "Thought it best to send the medicines instead." "Best for whom?" Hope asked before she could stop herself. His eyes narrowed slightly. "For everyone concerned, Miss O'Sullivan." "I disagree," Hope said boldly. "My father was disappointed. My brothers had questions about treating livestock ailments they wanted to ask you. And She hesitated, then finished softly. "I missed our conversations." Lucas's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You're an unusual woman, Miss O'Sullivan." "Because I value substance over appearance?" "Because you refuse to see the reality of the situation." Lucas gestured to his scarred face. "This is what people see. This is what they remember. This is why I live alone." "By choice, not necessity," Hope countered. "You hide here because it's easier than facing potential rejection. But in doing so, you deny yourself potential acceptance as well." Lucas stared at her, seemingly caught between irritation and admiration. Finally, he sighed. Would you like to come inside? It's cold out here." Hope smiled, victory warming her more than any fire could. "I would, thank you." Inside, the cabin was as neat as she remembered, though with a few subtle changes, a vase of dried wildflowers on the table, a new quilt on the bed. Signs that Lucas had made some effort to improve his surroundings since her last visit. "Coffee?" he offered, moving to the stove. "Please." Hope removed her gloves, warming her hands by the fire. "Have you considered what I said about Casa Grande needing a doctor?" Lucas's back stiffened as he prepared the coffee. "I have." "And?" He turned, leaning against the counter, his scarred profile illuminated by the firelight. "And I think you underestimate people's reactions. You and your family might have adjusted to—" He gestured to his face. "This. But strangers? Frightened mothers with sick children? They would take one look and run the other direction." "Some might," Hope acknowledged. "At first, but your skills would speak for themselves." "It's not that simple." "It could be," Hope insisted. "Start small. Perhaps visit the ranch occasionally, let my brothers introduce you to neighbors, build trust gradually." Lucas poured coffee into 2 cups, bringing one to Hope. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, sending an unexpected warmth through Hope's hand. "Why do you care?" Lucas asked abruptly. "Why this determination to drag me back into society?" Hope met his intense gaze. "Because I see a good man wasting his gifts. Because the world needs more healers, not fewer. Because—" She hesitated, then admitted softly, "Because I enjoy your company, and I think you might enjoy mine, if you allowed yourself to." A charged silence filled the small cabin. Lucas stood motionless, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Hope feared she had overstepped, revealing too much of her growing feelings for this complex, wounded man. Finally, Lucas spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "You deserve better company than a scarred recluse, Hope O'Sullivan." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it made her heart beat faster. "Perhaps you should let me decide what I deserve," she replied softly. Something shifted in Lucas's expression, a softening, a surrender. "I'll consider your proposal about visiting the ranch. No promises beyond that." It was a small concession, but Hope recognized the effort it represented. She smiled, sipping her coffee to hide how much his words affected her. "That's all I ask, for now." They talked for nearly an hour, the conversation flowing more easily than before. Lucas asked about her life before Arizona, and Hope found herself sharing memories of Boston she had almost forgotten, sailing in the harbor with her father, attending literary society meetings with her mother, the excitement of her first proper ball at 17. In turn, Lucas revealed more of his own past, his childhood in Philadelphia, his medical studies interrupted by the war, his decision to remain in the Army afterward rather than return to a society that seemed frivolous after the horrors he had witnessed. "And then, Little Bighorn," Hope said softly when he fell silent. Lucas nodded, his hand unconsciously touching the scarred side of his face. "I was treating wounded soldiers when the Lakota overran our position. Took an axe blow meant to finish a cavalry officer. Woke up days later, one of the few survivors, face in bandages." His expression darkened with the memory. When they finally removed them, the nurse fainted. Hope winced at the cruelty of that reaction. "I'm sorry." "It was honest, at least," Lucas said with grim humor. "Better than the forced smiles and averted eyes that followed." "What about your fiancée?" Hope asked hesitantly. "You mentioned her before." Lucas's jaw tightened. "Elizabeth waited until I was recovered enough to travel to St. Louis. Made it through one dinner together before she confessed she couldn't marry me. Said it would be unfair to both of us that she wasn't strong enough to face society with a husband who looked like—" He gestured to his scars. She was right, of course. "She was a coward," Hope countered fiercely. "Love should be stronger than fear of others' opinions." Lucas studied her with surprised interest. "You have strong convictions, Miss O'Sullivan." "Hope," she corrected gently. "If you can use my given name once, surely you can continue." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Hope," he acknowledged. "It suits you." The way he said her name sent a pleasant shiver through her. Hope realized with sudden clarity that her feelings for Lucas Lawson had progressed far beyond neighborly concern or even friendship. In the short time she had known him, he had captured her heart with his quiet strength, his hidden kindness, his resilience in the face of rejection. The realization must have shown on her face, for Lucas's expression changed, becoming guarded once more. "It's getting late," he said, rising from his chair. "You should return home before dark." Hope wanted to protest, but knew he was right. The winter daylight was already fading. "Will you come to dinner tomorrow?" she asked as she gathered her things. "Father would truly like to thank you properly." Lucas hesitated, then nodded. "I'll come, around sunset." Hope couldn't suppress her smile. "I'll look forward to it." As she rode home through the winter landscape, Hope's thoughts were filled with contradictory emotions: elation at Lucas's agreement to visit, concern that she was developing feelings he might never return, determination to show him that his scars didn't diminish his worth in her eyes. The following evening, Hope found herself uncharacteristically nervous, changing her dress twice before settling on a blue wool that brought out the color of her eyes. She arranged her hair with extra care, securing the auburn waves with her mother's silver combs. "You look lovely," Henry observed as she checked the roasting venison for the third time. "Though I doubt our guest will notice what you're wearing." Hope flushed. "I don't know what you mean." Henry chuckled. "Of course not, just as you don't know why you've been watching the window for the past hour." Before Hope could formulate a retort, the sound of hoofbeats announced a rider approaching. Through the window, she saw Lucas dismounting, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. He had dressed with care as well. She noted clean shirt, dark vest, his wild hair tamed and combed back from his face. "He's here," Hope announced unnecessarily, smoothing her skirts one final time. The evening surpassed even Hope's expectations. Lucas arrived with gifts: a bottle of good whiskey for Henry, a book of poetry for Hope that he had mentioned during their last conversation. He made a visible effort to engage with the twins, answering their questions about treating livestock ailments with patience and expertise. After dinner, when the twins had gone to the barn and Henry had retired to his room with a knowing wink at Hope, Lucas and Hope found themselves alone by the fireplace once more. "Your family is kind," Lucas observed, staring into the flames. "They like you," Hope replied simply. "As do I." Lucas turned to face her, the firelight softening the stark lines of his scars. "You should be careful, Hope O'Sullivan." "About?" "Befriending scarred recluses," he said, but there was a hint of humor in his tone that hadn't been there before. "People might talk." "Let them," Hope countered boldly. "I've never much cared for gossip." Lucas studied her for a long moment, something new and vulnerable in his eyes. "What is it you want from me?" "Hope." The directness of the question took her breath away. Hope considered her answer carefully, aware that her response might determine the course of whatever was growing between them. "Your friendship for a start," she finally said. "Your presence in our lives, perhaps in time." She hesitated, then met his gaze directly. "Perhaps more, if you were so inclined." Lucas's breath caught audibly. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," Hope countered. "I'm not a child, Lucas. I'm 22 years old. I've had suitors before. I know my own mind and heart." "And you think you want a scarred former army surgeon who lives alone in the wilderness?" His tone was incredulous, but Hope detected a flicker of hope beneath the skepticism. "I think I want a brave, intelligent, compassionate man who saved my life and healed my father," she corrected. "A man who reads poetry and remembers which flowers I mentioned liking. A man who sees beyond surfaces to what matters." Lucas stood abruptly, pacing before the fire. "This is madness. You deserve someone whole, someone young and unscarred by war." "I deserve someone who respects me enough to let me make my own choices," Hope replied firmly. "And you deserve someone who sees your true value, not just your appearance." Lucas stopped pacing, turning to face her with an expression of such raw vulnerability that Hope's heart ached for him. "I've spent 3 years believing no woman would ever look at me with anything but pity or revulsion," he said quietly. "I don't know how to trust what you're offering." Hope rose, closing the distance between them. Slowly, deliberately, she reached up and placed her palm against the scarred side of his face. Lucas flinched but didn't pull away, his eyes searching hers for any sign of disgust or hesitation. "Trust this," Hope whispered. "Trust that I see you, all of you, and find you beautiful." For a breathless moment, they stood frozen, Hope's hand cradling his scarred cheek. Lucas's eyes filled with disbelief and dawning hope. Then, with infinite gentleness, he covered her hand with his own, turning his face to press a kiss against her palm. The simple gesture brought tears to Hope's eyes. Lucas noticed immediately, his expression clouding with concern. "I've upset you." "No," Hope assured him, smiling through her tears. "You've moved me." Understanding dawned in Lucas's eyes. With careful deliberation, he brought his other hand up to cup her face, mirroring her gesture. "Hope O'Sullivan," he murmured, "you are the most remarkable woman I have ever known." Then, with exquisite tenderness, he lowered his head and kissed her. The kiss was brief, gentle, almost reverent, a question as much as a caress. When Lucas pulled back, uncertainty in his eyes, Hope answered by rising on tiptoe to kiss him again, her hands sliding around his neck to draw him closer. This time, the kiss deepened, years of Lucas's loneliness and isolation melting away beneath Hope's unwavering acceptance. When they finally parted, both breathless, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I never thought to feel this way again," he confessed softly. "To want this connection." "Neither did I," Hope admitted. "Not until a scarred stranger saved me from wolves and showed me what true courage looks like." A hint of a smile touched Lucas's lips. "I believe you saved me as well, Hope O'Sullivan, from a fate far worse than wolves." In the months that followed, Casa Grande witnessed a remarkable transformation. The reclusive stranger from the mountains began making regular appearances in town, first at the O'Sullivan Ranch, then occasionally accompanying Hope to church or the general store. Initially, there were stares and whispers about his scarred appearance, but as Lucas gradually began offering medical assistance, setting a broken arm here, treating a fever there, the community's curiosity turned to appreciation. By summer, Lucas had established a small practice in a room adjoining the general store, visiting 3 days a week. Children, initially frightened by his appearance, soon learned that Dr. Lawson always carried peppermint sticks in his bag and spoke to them as if they were important people worth listening to. Women who had once crossed the street to avoid him now sought his medical advice and nodded respectfully when they passed. Throughout this gradual reintegration into society, Hope remained steadfast at Lucas's side. Their courtship progressed with deliberate care, each mindful of the other's vulnerabilities. They rode together across the Arizona landscape, picnicked by hidden streams, shared books and conversations by firelight. Each day, Lucas grew more comfortable in his own skin, less likely to turn his scarred side away from those he encountered. On a warm evening in late August, 6 months after their first meeting, Lucas and Hope sat on the porch of the O'Sullivan Ranch, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Henry dozed in his chair nearby, his health fully restored. The twins were visible in the distance, driving cattle toward the barn. "I received a letter today," Lucas said, breaking a comfortable silence, "from the territorial governor." Hope turned to him with raised eyebrows. "What did it say?" "They're establishing a small hospital in Tucson. Asked if I would consider taking a position there, training other doctors in frontier medicine." Lucas's expression was thoughtful. "Someone recommended me, spoke highly of my work here." "That's wonderful," Hope exclaimed. "Will you accept?" Lucas studied her face carefully. "It would mean moving to Tucson." "I see." Hope tried to keep disappointment from her voice. Tucson was nearly a day's journey by horseback, too far for regular visits. Lucas reached for her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "I told them I would consider it, but only under certain conditions." "What conditions?" "That the position not begin until next spring," Lucas said, "and that suitable accommodations be provided for a married man and his wife." Hope's breath caught. "Lucas?" With his free hand, Lucas reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet pouch. "I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment." He emptied the contents into his palm, a gold ring set with a small emerald. "It was my mother's, the only thing I kept from my life before." He slid from his chair to one knee before her, still holding her hand. Hope O'Sullivan, you found me when I was lost to myself. You saw beauty where I believed none remained. You gave me courage to rejoin the world." His voice roughened with emotion. "I love you more than I ever thought possible. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears filled Hope's eyes as she nodded, too overcome for words. Lucas slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to gather her in his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that spoke volumes about the depth of his feelings. A discreet cough reminded them they weren't alone. Henry was awake, watching them with undisguised delight. "About time," he remarked, his eyes twinkling. "I was beginning to think I'd need another bout of pneumonia to move things along." Hope laughed through her tears, leaning against Lucas as he kept one arm securely around her waist. "You knew he was going to propose?" "Asked for my blessing weeks ago," Henry confirmed with satisfaction. "Though I told him he'd had it from the moment he saved your life." Lucas smiled, the expression no longer awkward on his scarred face. "I wanted to be sure I had something worthy to offer, a future, a practice, a life beyond isolation." "You've always had something worthy to offer," Hope countered, touching his cheek gently. "You just needed to believe it yourself." Their wedding took place in October, when the desert bloomed with unexpected color after autumn rains. The entire community of Casa Grande attended, along with several of Lucas's former Army colleagues who had responded to his long overdue letters. The territorial governor himself came to witness the union, eager to meet the doctor who would soon join his medical initiative. If any of the guests noticed Lucas's scars, they gave no sign. Instead, they saw what Hope had recognized from the beginning, a man of exceptional character, strength, and dignity. A man whose outer wounds could not diminish his inner light. A man worthy of love. As Lucas and Hope exchanged vows beneath an arbor woven with desert wildflowers, the words they spoke were a promise not just to each other, but to the future they would build together, a future where true beauty was recognized, not in perfect features, but in perfect understanding. Not in flawless appearance, but in flawless acceptance. After the ceremony, as guests celebrated with music and dancing, Lucas led Hope away from the crowd for a moment of privacy. In the golden light of sunset, he took both her hands in his blue eyes bright with emotion. "When those wolves chased you to my doorstep," he said softly, "I thought I was saving your life. I never imagined you would save mine in return." Hope smiled, reaching up to trace the line of his scar with gentle fingers. "Perhaps we saved each other." Lucas turned his face to kiss her palm, a gesture that had become precious to them both. "I love you, Hope Lawson." "And I love you," Hope replied, rising on tiptoe to kiss him properly. Scars and all. 10 years later, the Lawson house on the outskirts of Tucson buzzed with activity as it did most days. Lucas, now the respected director of the Territorial Hospital's training program, sat on the porch with a medical journal while Hope tended her garden nearby. Their 8-year-old twins, Sarah and Henry, named for their grandparents, chased each other around the yard, while their youngest 4-year-old James concentrated on building a fort from sticks and stones. Lucas looked up from his reading to watch his family, a quiet contentment warming his chest. The scars that had once defined his existence were now merely one part of a life rich with purpose and love. Patients still occasionally stared when meeting him for the first time, but their discomfort invariably gave way to respect as they experienced his skill and compassion. Hope caught him watching and smiled, the same smile that had first penetrated his defenses all those years ago. She set aside her gardening tools and joined him on the porch, slipping her hand into his. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, leaning against his shoulder. Lucas squeezed her hand gently. "About wolves." Hope laughed softly. "An unusual topic on such a beautiful day." "Not so unusual," Lucas countered, kissing her temple. "If not for those wolves, I might never have found you. Or rather, you might never have found me." "I would have found you eventually," Hope declared with characteristic certainty. "Some things are simply meant to be." As their children's laughter filled the air around them, Lucas couldn't help but agree. Sometimes the wildest turns in life's path, even terrifying encounters with wolves, led exactly where one was meant to go, all along. "No regrets?" he asked, a question he still posed occasionally, even after all these years. Hope turned her face up to his, love shining in her eyes as clearly as on the day they wed. Not a single one. Lucas lowered his head to kiss her. Grateful beyond words for the woman who had shown him that true beauty lay not in unmarred features, but in the courage to love and be loved completely, scars and all.